A little bit late already, so I will ask our vice chair, please, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome back to the Environment and Agriculture Committee this morning. We are going to discuss our 6 bills that are retained bills, and we are not planning on execing anything today, but we do want to discuss what our thoughts and comments are on these 6 bills. And I also wanted to go over a couple other things that have come across my path. So, good morning, everybody, and welcome back. Hope you had a pleasant summer, all 5 days of it. As I've been dealing with a lot of water in Ackworth, where we have all horrible measures of flooding going on. Anyway, I'd like to start off with our first bill, HB 37, establishing a committee to study best practices for companion animal groomers. And I would like to entertain any comments about what we may or may not do with this bill and your thoughts on it. If there's any particular work that you feel needs to be done on it, or whatever. Representative Brulard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I believe that we're already over permitted, we're already over licensed. I think it should be up to the consumer to let them see whoever they do so choose to go to for their animal grooming activity, to say, okay, what makes this person qualified? Are they certified? Have they gone to some sort of institute? Let them hear by word of mouth ratings, and let them be the ones to decide the groomer's expertise.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Representative Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And with respect to my colleagues' comments, I'd say this committee doesn't necessarily have to result in more permitting or regulations. One of the things we talked about was that there might be a set of recommendations, for example, or questions about where policies needed to be posted, et cetera. So it's not a foregone conclusion by any means that the result of a study committee is going to be excess permitting or anything like that. So whatever the outcome eventually is, I just want us to be clear about that. And personally, I think from some of the testimony we heard before, that some of the things that even fall short of any additional regulations or permitting could potentially be helpful to the industry and to clients.
Representative Creighton.
I agree that other things could come out of here other than licensure. However, I would say that the committee is not going to add any expertise that's not already out there provided by the AKC or other agencies or private agencies that actually do have the expertise. And so the committee would be hearing from experts that are already deeply involved in the situation. I don't think providing anything new other than an additional committee that we would have to be responsible for.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wonder if, since we're only talking about forming a committee, I just wonder if this isn't a good place to aggregate all of the information that Representative Creighton mentions, so, and along with information about potential harms done by these individuals or this profession, and like a collection of information about how frequently that happens.
Anyone else? I'm sorry, Representative Murray. I'm like popping my eye in here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think also I'd like to mention that we heard compelling sort of testimony regarding some situations that had arisen as a result of some experiences that resulted in sort of concern and oversight around animal welfare. And I do think that it's important that the charge does say that it's looking at a few sort of areas. So it's not a wide open area. It discusses safety and facility standards, possible certification and licensure, and then waste and disposal. So those are things that even are very germane to some of the other topics we discuss in the committee. And maybe, as Representative Germana said, other types of recommendations may come out of it as a result.
There you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having sat through listening to this legislation for the last 2 terms, it seems that it's the same people and it's the same person that keeps, or people that keep bringing this up. And we have thousands in the state. And if you talk to different people across the state in this industry that are doing a great job, they don't want to see anything else done. They are perfectly happy. They regulate themselves. Word of mouth is one of the most damaging things that can happen to a pet groomer.
Or positive.
Representative Nab.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to comment that the many people I've mentioned this to have been surprised that there isn't any sort of standards or practice around animal grooming. And I asked my dog groomer about it, and she said that some of the things that were done in the situation where the dog died, they would never do. So, you know, I do agree that creating a permitting process is probably overly cumbersome, but I think having just best practices out there could be a good outcome of this. Without requiring licensure or permitting, it would just create standards that people adhere to. So, thank you.
Anyone else? So, from my own point of view on this is that, first of all, in terms of testimony, we only had like 1 or 2 people come this time, as opposed to previous terms. We had 5 the last time. So it's not very representative of the pet groomer community. And the things that are being asked in this bill to study, safety facility standards, possible certification, licensure, whatever, waste and chemical disposal, education, continuing education. I have spoken to members of different animal groups, the AKC, dogs, various organizations, who already have standards in place for their members that their members follow. And I would think that that would be sufficient for the community to pretty much educate their own community and police themselves with that information. As well as, consumers who are aware of whether their dog groomer is certified through the AKC or certified through some other organization. So it just seems to me to be redundant to ask the House to have, the House and Senate, the legislature, to have a study committee to do the work that these organizations have already pretty much done. So for my purposes, I don't see any need for this bill at all. Representative Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to maybe respectfully, if I can, disagree, because I would like to see that I'm trying to think about instances in where there are folks in these industries who may not be part of those other organizations that you mentioned, and also with the discussion of chemical and waste disposal, that's really the first time in looking at that sort of niche of topic that we've really delved into this. I agree that it has come up in past legislation, but as far as this bill and the general topic, but as far as waste disposal and chemical disposal, best practices, I would like to see there at least an opportunity to consider this.
Thank you, Representative Murray, for bringing that up, because it seems to me, as I recall from my own, and maybe Representative Nab can chime in on this, from my own knowledge of like local ordinances in various municipalities, they already have something in their ordinances to say how animal waste is handled, and as well as any kind of chemical disposal too. It would seem to me that municipalities already have that in their codes. Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If they're using any type of chemicals, as we all know, the label is the law. And I am sure that all of these people are reading the label, and it also talks about how you are to dispose of that type of chemical. Again, the label is the law, so I don't think there's any additional requirement needed regarding that. It's pretty straightforward.
Anyone else? Representative Nab?
Thank you very much. I don't actually have an answer to your question. I'm sorry,
Okay.
but I think Representative Comtois spoke to it. I recall, and I might be wrong about this, that one of the outcomes we discussed when we first discussed this bill was standards that already existed and putting them on the USDA, or not the USDA, the Department of Agricultural website, using standards from the AKC or a similar organization, and just having those posted. And is that a potential outcome and something we could direct if we decide not to move forward with this bill?
I would have to touch base again with Commissioner Jasper and find out if that's doable, if they'd be willing to do that. Representative Bixby, good morning.
Good morning. So if we decide that having the department webpage make reference to standards that are already out there, that's something that we could do by amending this bill rather than by having a study committee. So if there's someone who wants to take on that task, then and bring forward an amendment for when we exec, probably in late October, then that would be another approach to this.
Okay. Anyone else? Representative Potenza.
I think that's a great idea. If you just spend 2 minutes in Google, the best practices are all there from the ASPCA. It's all so clear, and being able to have that information just on on DES's website is, I think it's great, and without having to have a study committee and all of that. So, if nobody else will do that amendment, I will. I think that information is key. So I think, and there's tons of it.
That would not be on the DES website. That would be on the Department of Agriculture.
Oh yeah, I mean Department of Agriculture. Sorry. Yeah.
All right, Representative Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to add that I think that there is an understandable philosophical difference among some of us about how the free market functions, and how, to what extent the free market can be expected to regulate itself, and the extent to which we say that any business interest or industry should simply be regulating itself. And when we're talking about communities of various sizes, communities that may not have more than one or maybe two, I don't know, we'd have to look at it, right? Facilities that offer these kinds of services, your choices are limited, right? And we're also talking about a variety of price ranges, and people who can afford to pay a higher price for services are more likely, I would assume, to get a quality of care that may not be available. I'm not presuming to prejudge that, but may not be available at places where you don't have where the price for the service is lower. So I wanted to add that as is something for us to think about as well, right? We're not saying that this applies to the vast majority of places that offer these services, but if these concerns exist for even a percentage of that, it's still a significant number of pets and Granite Staters who are affected. And as I said, I think it's entirely goodwill, and there are philosophical differences, as I said, about the faith that some of us have that the free market is simply going to regulate itself on behalf of the interests of people and pets.
Okay. All right. I think we've kind of put that all those ideas together, and we can move forward to the next bill if that is okay with everybody. So,
So do we agree that Kent is gonna do an amendment on that, or?
So you would work on doing an amendment for that bill? Okay. We'll see what you bring. Thank you. All right, moving on to HB 122, relative to micro enterprise home kitchen operations. I believe Representative Comtois would like to speak to this.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to have the opportunity to bring forth an amendment because some of the information already in this bill has already been passed, especially where it talks about maximum gross sales. We've actually eliminated that dollar amount. So there do need to be some changes in there. And I would really like to have an opportunity to present an amendment to the committee in the next few weeks, if possible.
Anyone else have any comments on that? Okay,
I just,
Representative Creighton?
and just a question, and so exactly what would you be looking to that amendment? What would it look like?
I'm looking at an amendment, and I went to Montana and to look at enterprise home kitchen operations where a person could sell to an informed, and the key word there is an informed end consumer, any product without labeling or packaging, and that way we could have mitigated what happened up in Meredith where they had the cease and desist with regards to donating food to help people that didn't have any means of buying their own.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion on this? Representative Murray?
Yeah, thanks. Without knowing the particular details of what transpired fully up in Meredith, like you mentioned, I do know that like the Good Samaritan Act does cover certain donations, and so to that end, I also am curious about what the definition of informed consumer would be, and so how would you determine what an informed consumer would be?
I don't have the definition in front of me, but an informed end consumer would be a person that is aware that the person selling the product is not licensed, that the kitchen has not been inspected, and that they're buying it with conversation with the person selling that product, what's in it, and have a conversation. They would be completely informed, and they would have the option to choose whether to buy or not to buy.
Representative Murray?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Follow up, if I may.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. To that end, is there, have you talked with anybody in sort of the legal end of things? Informed consumer could mean many things, and in the event that some sort of harm or damage would happen as a result of an uninspected product, what could happen if there was serious illness or some other thing? Is that something that would be considered in the potential legislation?
Representative Comtois, you may reply.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize for not raising my hand earlier.
No worries.
We already have legislation, not using the word informed and consumer, but we have legislation where you can have a homestead license that is uninspected. The difference is that you have to have a label on it. We have raw milk products that are from uninspected facilities. You just have to have a note saying that it is from an uninspected facility. So we already have a precedence for this in statute.
Okay. Representative Dutzy, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, I'm going to have my ignorance on display here because I don't know a lot about this area. But for example, the other day, one of our colleagues was, selling honey out of the back of his truck. I bought it, didn't even think about it. It was fine. So I'm assuming that we have a lot of people who do backyard things, and maybe they make 20 or 30 jam things. How is that regulated now? Is it not regulated? How do we handle it in law?
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, as we heard in previous testimony, and the reason we eliminated the gross sales dollar amount from DHHS was that they don't inspect or regulate it at all. So, that is the short answer.
Representative Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One point of clarification. I do believe that there is, within DHHS and homestead licensure, there are certain products that can and cannot be produced to be under homestead licensure. And it depends on bacteria, certain things that may or may not grow in them. And there is a list of products.
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is absolutely correct. This would not fall under the Homestead Licensure Act.
Representative Bixby, you had your hand up?
I just wanted to point out that on page 3 of the bill that we have in front of us, the current definition is actually there. A homestead food operation means, what is struck out, a person who produces homestead food products, excluding potentially hazardous food, only in the home kitchen of that person's primary residence. So the current the things that you're currently able to produce on that using that homestead exemption are things that you produce exclusively in your home, and it can't be potentially hazardous food, and there is a definition of potentially hazardous food on the HHS website but essentially jams and jellies, honey, maple syrup, all fall under the non-hazardous category. Things that are fermented, like pickles, are not considered, are not allowed in the non-hazardous. Anything that is dairy is an animal product, other than, I think, fresh eggs would be considered not part of that exemption. So there are, and you can, so there, basically anything that has the potential of going bad quickly would be considered a potentially hazardous food.
Okay.
And so you can, and there's no regulation if you are selling jams and jellies and that sort of thing. Other than I think there is a labeling requirement, but beyond that, there's a fair amount of freedom in that regard already.
All right, well, thank you. So I suppose with any of these retained bills, if anybody is working on an amendment to them within the next couple of weeks, I would expect that the amendment would be drafted and shared with the committee so that we would have all the information needed when we come back to do the exec on these bills. And also to recognize that if the bill is passed through the committee with an amendment and it goes to the House floor, there's still a vote that has to happen with that. And then it would go on to the Senate as well. So, we have to still be mindful of the procedure for how this is going to go ahead. Any other comment on this particular bill? Nope. Seeing none, let's move on to our next bill, HB 326, prohibiting the use of second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides. And I would particularly draw your attention to a preliminary report that was sent to us from the Pesticide Review Board, which it was sent electronically. I do have a hard copy here with me, and we have the pleasure of Mr. Rousseau joining us today. If we have any questions for Mr. Rousseau from the Pesticide Review Board, I would encourage your questions as a result of the preliminary report and with respect to the language in this bill. And so who would like to start off the conversation? Representative Bixby.
Yeah, so, having read through the preliminary report, was looking at the recommendations in section E on page 10. I think we all have this on front of us, so if you want to take a look at that. One of the second recommendation on that list is consider product label revision to identify state-specific restriction of second-generation anticoagulant rodenticide contingent on EPA's final decision. For example, certain pesticide label instructions restrict use in particular states beyond EPA requirements. This may be considered for second-generation anticoagulants. And so that's essentially a follow-up to what's mentioned in the report, which is that the EPA is really looking into creating a restricted use category for these products. And I think that there is based on the EPA's movement in that direction, based on what we heard in testimony last spring, and based on the information in this report that indicates that there are a number of wildlife species in New Hampshire that have been showing the presence of these anticoagulants insofar as they can be tested. And testing wildlife is a much more challenging process than testing farm animals. So it's much harder to get the data. So insofar as there is data, it says that this stuff is out there. I think that it would be a sensible approach to make sure that the people who are using these products know how to use them. And so I would suggest that we amend the bill to say that, to recommend to the Pesticide Control Board that they use their existing rulemaking power to make these restricted use in New Hampshire, and if federal regulations come down soon enough to make that superfluous, great. But if the potential government shutdown that they're talking about happens at the end of September, and we don't know how long that's going to last because we know how things fail to work sometimes in Washington, then the EPA may end up being very much, substantially delayed in being able to finalize this rule that they're proposing. So, and I don't think that we should continue to put our wildlife at jeopardy during that period. So I think that we should, as a step to protect our state wildlife, say we will make it restricted use in New Hampshire, and if when the feds come down with their final rule, we will then make sure that our rules are consistent with their rules.
Thank you, Representative Bixby. My own thoughts on this are, I haven't seen any reports that actually show numbers or any kind of definitive statement that these rodenticides have absolutely caused negative circumstances with our predator population. I mean, I haven't seen that there is a decrease of our predator population directly tied or as a result of the use of these pesticides. And I know that might be hard to obtain that kind of data, but we have to look at the fact that if we are restricting use, then what that is doing is pushing the homeowner to employ professional services to deal with a rat or mouse or rodent problem that they may have in their home, in their farm, wherever, their business. And I'm kind of torn with this because, I certainly don't want people to be purchasing buckets of this stuff and just tossing it wherever. There should be some some education, some knowledge of how to properly use these substances. But by the same token, we're hearing, at least for me, I'm thinking I'm only hearing anecdotal evidence from rehabbers or wildlife organizations of certain instances where they've found poison predators. So I'm kind of mixed on this. So Representative Murray.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I do have some questions that I think maybe you all at the department could speak to. So if I
Certainly, I invite you to the microphone, Mr. Rousseau.
One of the things that I'm curious about is the Bobcat study that's listed through SUNY SUNY. Is that New York?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm curious about that data, and before we get into that, I also just wanted to mention, I think in the previous hearing, if my memory serves me correctly, we did talk about some concerns about some of these things being widely available in large quantities, and also available online in large quantities, and to which end I think there has to be some discussion, I think, around the availability of some of these products in to the general public in that amount. And I think part of the discussion was about how do we monitor that? What oversight mechanism would there be to potentially limit that? So the first part is with the Bobcat study. I'd like to touch on that and then talk about maybe next steps or other measures that we could do for personal use purchasing.
Okay, David Rousseau with New Hampshire Department of Agriculture, Markets and Food. In regard to the Bobcat study, and I'm one of 10 of the folks that are on the task force, and I know there are other people here, so if I miss something, I just want to make that point and someone can fill in the gaps. But the Bobcat study was part of a study from New Hampshire, University of New Hampshire Diagnostic Lab, and it was actually to study distemper in wild animals, Bobcat being one of them. And they were able to wrap in a couple other studies to that distemper study, and one of them was what is the residue of rodenticides in wild animals. And so trappers would provide the livers of these animals that they would trap, and that's really the only way you can identify the rodenticide and its lethal impact to an animal. So that's how that study. I think that was the question, and it actually includes Vermont, New York, and New Hampshire animals. And yes, there is residue in wildlife. That's not that's a question the answer is yes. To what extent the impact is that's the question now. And I think that the reason why the task force in its 5 months or 6 months that they put together, 8 meetings, decided to go into further study was to try to identify the actual impact to wildlife populations. And I'm sorry, I missed the second part of the.
May I?
Yes.
The second part was just sort of mechanisms for personal purchase of these rodenticides, whether it's online or in the stores in the larger quantities that we were hearing about in our previous hearing. And I guess my concern is, I think we had conversation at that time about there being concern about the ability to monitor that. And so I'm when you talked about buckets, Madam Chair, I think of these things, we do know that they're out there for purchase right now in those quantities. So I'm curious about your thoughts about changes around that.
Certainly, if the second generation anticoagulant rodenticides are restricted use, that takes it out of the hands of anyone that does not have a license. And I think you will see an impact as far as availability to general consumers. On the history of rodenticide regulation in right around 2011, EPA tried to identify those products as only available to folks that are, that try to get it out of the hand of the general consumers. Clearly that isn't working. So someone could go to certain websites, even certain stores, and buy a 5-gallon container of some of these materials. As far as how we watch that or monitor that, it's really, when you have a general use situation where someone could just go in a store and buy something or buy it online, we can't really track that very well. If it's restricted, we can track it because that licensed individual has to report what they use in a given year, how much, where they used it, what the target organism is. So there's control there.
Representative Murray, I know that the other thing too is, as a consumer of a pesticide service, I know that some of these pesticide service companies, or animal rodent control companies, I should say, are stepping away from using some of these second generation rodenticides. I've received a letter from the company that I deal with saying that, you know, they've had enough of consumer feedback of people who don't want to use these kinds of substances on their properties, that they are now stepping away from the use of these. They still have them in their toolbox, but they're stepping away from them and suggesting other means of rodent control. So, and I think that there's also at play here an element of the market correcting the use or overuse of some of these substances. And I think that we should also be cognizant of that kind of activity that's going on, just so we know. Representative Howard.
Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple points to make. As far as anecdotal evidence goes, it will probably have to suffice because wild animals don't go to researchers to die. They're not penned in. So the fact that they are in the hands of researchers at all means that there is a significant or some impact. And whether or not it endangers the species that's too late, right? And I use paraquat as an example. Right now, we're dealing with the possibility that Parkinson's is caused by paraquat, and they're using it in the fields where, you know, workers from, you know, farm workers are being exposed to it now, and there's lawsuits that are pursuing. I just think that it's too late to wait until the impact is so great that we're talking about, you know, like the reduction or the elimination of a species.
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, a couple things. I was at a meeting not too long ago where they said that the bobcat population was on the rise, and that they were starting to see a lot of roadkill in bobcats. So, just wanted to put that out there. The other thing is the Pesticide Control Board did exactly what we asked them to do. They went in, they did the study, they looked at it. I do not think that it is this committee's job or the legislator's job to tell the Pesticide Control Board which pesticides should be restricted use and which should not. I believe it sets a slippery slope in the future. I believe we rely on the experts, and usually when we make a suggestion to them, they listen to us. The other thing is rodent problem is on the rise in agriculture. I went to a greenhouse a couple of years ago, never saw a rat in my life in New Hampshire, and they were running rampant all of a sudden. People need to be able to correct these problems, and it's not through a pesticide service that's going to handle it in large areas. Rodents carry disease, and they affect agriculture in a bad way. So we have to be mindful of that also. And I do believe that the Pesticide Control Board will listen to whatever we're saying here. It will go back to them. I'm going to make an assumption, Director Russo, but I am sure that you will bring everything that we've talked to back to them and our concerns. But I also think it's not our place.
Representative Bixby.
Question for the director. If this is restricted use, so a farmer who has a pesticide license would be able to use it, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Creighton.
Sorry, I'll yield to.
Oh, Representative Dutsey, I'm sorry. I didn't see you over there.
That's okay, thank you. I was surprised to learn on page 9, the second paragraph, when we heard this bill first, I mean, the discussion was all about the increase in rats and how it was affecting the general population. And I was really surprised. It says the type of rodents noted included the house mouse, and the house mouse was identified as the most common request for control, followed by the Norway rat. Can you educate me? I mean, you know, I have cats, and every once in a while I see a dead mouse, and you know, I just don't understand. Are mice, how devastating are mice to children, homeowners, agriculture? Because I'm unaware of that problem.
If it's okay, I think it'd be best if this question was answered by Mr. Karachi actually oversaw this study, and if that's okay, I think, Adam, if you're all right with that, I can.
Good morning, Mr. Karachi, and welcome.
Good morning. Madam Karachi. I own Pest End. I was the structural pest control person on the board. So to answer your question, it really depends. Obviously, you get the occasional mouse that your cat catches, not a big deal. What we see a lot of, especially in multifamily housing or low-income housing, is the problem persists, and then you get into attic spaces or you get into basements, and the amount of rodent droppings and urine that is inside of the insulation or in those areas causes asthma, health hazards, other problems. So it's not necessarily the occasional mouse. It's the situation where they don't take care of the problem, whether that's on their own or hiring someone. They don't think it's a big deal, and now all of a sudden that 1 to 2 mice becomes 40, 50, 100 mice in a pretty quick amount of time, and then that can cause a lot of health hazards, more so for children than anything else. And then on top of that, if they go to clean it up, you can get hantavirus, you can get other respiratory issues that can come from the droppings in urine as well.
Representative Creighton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Russo, just a question on the recommendations. What legislation would you need to enact these recommendations? Is there anything that you would need from us to move forward with the recommendations from your study?
If EPA moves ahead with their preliminary decision, which was to restrict the second generation anticoagulants, there would be no need for legislation at the state level.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Rousseau, Director Rousseau, what's your sense of the time period where the EPA would do this?
When we ask, we hear December of this year. My experience is that sometimes it'll go a few months over that, but that's what I've been told. Most likely December.
And as a follow-up, what is your sense of, do you believe that they would move for restricting this?
Yes,
Substances?
I firmly believe that.
Representative Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess to that end, if we're concerned about a timeline where there would be a period of time where second use has not been enacted by the EPA, would it not make sense to put something temporary in place that could give us 6 months to a year, where that could then be sunsetted and we could reevaluate where we're at, if that's based on the study results, the information. I'm a little bit concerned that we don't have, if there's no data, there's no problem. And if we can't collect the data because second generation general use is not tracked, and we had testimony as to the effects of these things, and sort of we are seeing the writing on the wall and where the direction is going, it would be my preference to see something at least temporary put in place.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also wonder what the restrictions include, and if we don't need to use the EPA restrictions as a baseline, and see if it includes things like that are mentioned in the report, like protective clothing and that kind of stuff.
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If this product can be sold online in other states that are local to us that do not have restricted use,
you're going to make criminals out of law-abiding citizens because they will go and get what they need.
Representative Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that I agree with the point that the chair made earlier, very much so, about concern about, the cost burden, right? In terms of kind of the average, Granite Stater in terms of dealing with these issues and the expense of bringing in a pest control person as opposed to being able to deal with some issues on their own. I would also say I was really impressed when we heard testimony previously from our pest control specialists in terms of them describing, the kind of hierarchy or the level of techniques that they use, right? And this is kind of on the nuclear option end of things, and there are other things that you would try first. And I think we all accept when it comes to the application of these kinds of chemicals that there's a line that has to be drawn somewhere, right? So that we say that there is a point where it should be professionals who are doing this work as opposed to an individual in their own home and in their own community. And it seems to me that the question about making it restricted, the second recommendation, I also agree with Representative Comtois about the Pest Control Board here did exactly what we asked them to do, delivered a report that gave us really valuable information. The second recommendation is that we could do something right, which is contingent upon the outcome of the EPA review, right? Which means either if that review takes longer than it should, then there is something in place, or if there are elements of that review that we're just not satisfied with, we could take a different route. I would also, if I may, just quickly point out, I hope we don't ignore the first and third recommendations. We've been talking a lot about the second recommendation, but this question about what kind of evidence we have about the scope of this problem is a difficulty in terms of how we're able to gather the data, as Representative Howard pointed out. And I tend to believe in a case like this where there's smoke, there's fire. If there's enough anecdotal evidence, it points to something bigger than what's here. And I would really like to see the development of what I see in the first and third points, because I think that's our best chance of getting better data so that we do have a better sense of the scope of the problem. Thank you. Sorry for the long-winded.
And I have a question for the director is, with regard to the recommendations that are in this report, are these recommendations that which you would have the Pesticide Control Board do? In other words, you recommend, the recommendation is for the Pesticide Control Board to explore potential for further research, etc.
So these recommendations are based on the 10 individuals that represent, and that the list of folks and their
Yes.
affiliations are listed on page 2.
Yes.
So so these are recommendations that were put forth by the task force. Certainly the board, and the board meets next Tuesday, and we'll review this, by the way. But and determine, what pieces the board could actually adopt as recommendations. Clearly, it's identified as a concern, the second generation residue in wildlife. So the board will probably, and I can't speak fully on the board. I work for the board. I'm not on the board, but the board could move to sort of identify that these 3 items be addressed.
Okay. But you wouldn't need any legislative directive, thank you, to put a restriction on any of these substances.
No,
You could do
I'm
that
sorry.
on your own.
Correct. I'm
perhaps.
sorry, I interrupted. Yeah, that's true.
Sure. Okay. All right. Any other, Representative Dotsie?
Yeah, so just for clarification, if we wanted to move forward with this bill as Representative Bixby said and restrict it, when we're looking at the time frame, I mean, we could move this through, and in December, if the EPA does rule on this, then the bill doesn't have, we can withdraw it. It doesn't have to go forward, correct? I mean, because it wouldn't go to committee until sometime in January anyway, correct?
Mhm. Yeah,
Right.
right.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, we could decide to move forward on it, but recognizing that if the timing coincides, the bill could be withdrawn.
And as I'm understanding, the Pesticide Control Board can also say, we're going to restrict usage of this product with this substance, and we wouldn't have to do anything. So, Representative Bixby.
So another possibility is that we could write the bill with an effective date, essentially saying that if the EPA has not acted by such and such a date, then then we direct the pesticide control board to make the to make it restricted use, so that and then that would also sort of create give a little bit more leeway and put a little bit more power still in the hands of the pesticide control board.
Representative Bixby, I think that I'm not, I don't know that I would want to direct the Pesticide Control Board to restrict something. I think that's something that we must leave up to them based on their study and how, you know, what their review board, the Pesticide Review Board decides. Representative Bixby?
Yeah, so I propose that I or someone else work on an amendment, and then when we come to exec this at the end of October, we can make a decision at that point as a committee, because I think there are clearly a couple of trains of thought here, and we're not going to get it resolved today.
No.
So we should
But it seems to me that and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it seems to me that we have two things that we're waiting for. We're either waiting for the EPA to come out with a decision or the Pesticide Review Board to come out with a decision. And I don't know that you need any legislative activity to go along with any of those two outcomes.
Well, I propose that that I or someone else who is interested in doing so make an amendment, and then we resolve it in when we come time to exec, because I don't think we're going to get any further today.
Okay. Representative Comtois, you have a comment.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. Although I understand Representative Bixby's concerns and other members of this delegation's concern, this committee's concern, we have a pesticide control board for a reason. We rely on their expertise. And again, they have done everything that we have asked. I think that legislating what they can and cannot restrict is a slippery slope. Because what's to stop in the future legislation from bypassing the Pesticide Control Board altogether and making further legislation on what can be used in agriculture or in the home or anywhere else?
Any other discussion? Do you have any other comments?
No, but thank you very much for your time on this subject. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you. All right. We will move on to our the next bill. And thank you very much. I want to extend this committee's thanks to the Pesticide Review Board for this very well-written preliminary report. We look forward to the final report, and we look forward to further conversation with you regarding this topic. Thank you very much. Okay. The next bill that we're going to discuss is HB 369, establishing a task force to provide energy relief on farms. Representative Bixby.
So last spring, I spoke with Ken Lavalley, who's the director of Cooperative Extension, to see if they would be interested in having a field specialist who would help farms assess and work out their energy efficiency and generation strategies in order to help farms negotiate basically the paperwork morass that this can turn into. And he said that he would be interested in having a position like that in cooperative extension. Cooperative extension has very good relationships across the agricultural community in the state. So this would be a good a way to provide support. A lot of farms could really use to have better energy efficiency and energy production. And I don't think I need to go into the details of, how, the various ways that would be useful. And the capacities of farms to, they have the land, they have the, to use solar to, for maple farmers upgrading to using more reverse osmosis, that sort of thing. This is this is something that cooperative extension could advise on, and I am happy to work with Ken LaValle and the department to come up with an amendment to this that changes it from a task force, which would just be a bunch of people talking in a room and not getting much done, to a field specialist who would actually be able to help move forward on energy, which is an important aspect of being able to run a farm effectively. So, any thoughts about that?
I just also wanted to interject that I did send out an email late last night for an email that I received from Griffin Roberge. He's the state energy program manager, who made us aware of the USDA federal funding programs, Rural Energy for America program, REAP. Apparently, that information is available to small businesses and agricultural producers for energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. So I'm wondering if there would be some overlap between what our New Hampshire Department of Energy is already doing versus what UNH may provide. Representative Bixby.
Yeah, so I actually spoke so the REAP program is run through the USDA office in Burlington, which covers both New Hampshire and Vermont. And I spoke to people who have gone through that process, and the REAP paperwork is it's fairly challenging. And so I got a list from Tara Sad at Council of State Governments. I got a list of what sorts of information a farmer would need to provide in order to apply for REAP for the REAP funding. It's the sort of thing where if you are a large and the REAP funding is available to small businesses. Small business, according to the feds, is anything under $50 million. So if you are a $50 million rural business, then you can apply for this. You can afford to have your accountants figure out all the details. If you are a farmer with half a dozen employees, you don't have, it's much more challenging. I talked to Coppelhouse Farm, which did go ahead with applying for a previous round of funding for solar stuff, and she said that that she had to basically cease all of her farming work for 2 or 3 weeks in order to be able to just figure out the paperwork. That's a burden that it would be nice to be able to sort of relieve the farmer of, and to some extent. So one of the things that I think would be a real benefit of of having a specialist would be to have someone who can help the farmers negotiate that REAP paperwork. Oh, and the other thing is, I speaking with the USDA person, she said the USDA does not have the capacity to assist farmers with the details. However, they do have a matching grant program that would allow them to cover some of the cost of a state specialist if we did that.
Representative Comtois?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Every county, I can't assume, but our county, we give money to UNH Extension Cooperative. And they're there to assist all people in the county, including farmers, with grants and other things. There's also a nonprofit agency called SCORE that will help anybody with anything and can help with any grants. I don't think we need to add another layer or another person to help with this. We have a lot of nonprofits out there. We have the New Hampshire Farm Bureau. We have UNH Extension in each county. We have SCORE and many others. I think that we need to maybe get the information out to people on what organizations are there, available to them, instead of putting in another position to do this.
Representative Murray, you had your hand up.
I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. I am in favor, as Representative Bixby said, you know, farmers already have very limited time to do these applications, and Representative Bixby is correct that when the application process does go forward in Vermont, they can't answer any of those technical questions at all. They are actually the person deciding whether or not to grant the application to the applicant. So if these folks are then having to juggle their farming practice or their production side of whatever their value-added product is, without those resources, we've heard from folks like the Cooperative Extension that yes, they would love to be able to help more easily facilitate this process for farmers. They just don't have enough of the funds or infrastructure in place, and this grant program would offer that or this assistance would offer that.
Representative Dutsey?
Yes, I was a member of SCORE several years ago for several years, and I'm not sure that they have different branches around the state. Maybe they do. Okay, so there are branches around the state, and there are farmers that or people who would have expertise in this area. Okay, because I was only colleagues with a lot of engineers, and nobody was a farmer. So I just want clarification on that, if SCORE does have that expertise, then they can be a resource.
Representative Comtois?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that in the Belknap area, we have a great chapter of SCORE, and some of them are in the industry.
Representative Howard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that there is efficiency in expertise, and if we were to have someone who specializes in just this process, then they can serve a broader swath of farmers and workers to get these grants. I work in a professional kitchen, and you don't put down one tool until you're finished with that job. You move on to the next tool. And I think that having a position like this would give you a sharp tool on that front.
Representative Bixby?
So the way that Cooperative Extension works, deals with their advising through the county extensions, is they have field experts who are who have different areas of expertise in every county. Those some counties will not have every single area of expertise. So, for instance, there are some counties that have someone who's a forest specialist. Not all counties have that, and the forest specialist will then be essentially loaned to other counties for that purpose. So, for instance, we have our agricultural specialist in Stratford County is a greenhouse specialist, and he will travel to other counties where that need greenhouse advising in order to provide that surface. So what this bill would do is it would create a field specialist with an expertise in energy. There is not currently a field specialist with an expertise in energy. And by creating that field specialist position, that person could serve every county in the state and provide really, the knowledge that a specialist can provide rather than a generalist.
Representative Comtois, and then Representative Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is basically directed at Representative Bixby. But UNH Extension does not need the legislature to direct what field specialists they have. They could do that on their own, couldn't they?
The issue is with the funding. So what the amendment that I'm proposing would provide the funding for one field specialist. And when I talked with Director LaValle, he said that would probably, with the combination of salary, benefits, and transportation, it would be about $100,000.
Representative Morse. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just hearing that it sounds like this is a recommendation by experts and specialists. And so would it not be a slippery slope if we don't listen to them and create something that we need?
Anyone else? Yeah. Representative Vogt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will second what Representative Morse has said, and I think when we have one of the top research universities in this state coming to us and we are reaching out and saying, we have an opportunity here to, as the Environment and Agriculture Committee for the state of New Hampshire, to bring somebody in from this top university to basically assist farmers with getting the resources they need in order to be successful. I will second that thought and also add that there definitely could be a slippery slope with that, because in the public eye, then it looks like, wow, the Environment and Agriculture Committee had an opportunity to give farmers the necessary resources, and then that did not occur. That is just all I'm elevating on that level. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Smart.
So I looked at that list this morning quickly when I was having my coffee. And I just went through and looked at the businesses in my county that I know about. And we keep talking about farmers, and a lot of those businesses are small businesses. They're not farmers. And they've received large sums of money. Representative Bixby said, I don't know, it was something about small businesses that earn 50 million or less are allowed to apply for this. I don't know, is there a way that we can limit and so that the farmers get first dibs? And that you can't, I don't know how that works, but it seems to me that adding a person to represent all the counties is going to enlarge not only the government, but that department, one person is going to say, oh, I can't do all the counties. And so it will increase that department, in turn increasing our taxes. So is there a way that we can lower that amount, use those funds, and to support our farmers and this venture instead of
Representative
creating
Bixby.
more?
Okay, so the way that the way that the REAP program, which is the basically rural energy program, that is something that is through the USDA, and the USDA makes the rules, and their rules say this is for rural operations, and any rural business or farm that is $50 million or under is qualified to apply for it. We can't affect those rules. What we can do is make our farmers more competitive in the competition for those funds by providing them with the assistance to apply for them.
Representative Smart.
Oh,
So the only way would be to raise more money for more taxes to support our small farmers that, I mean, I see this as a vicious cycle, not helping anybody.
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Basically, what it is hiring someone to write a grant. So you're hiring a grant writer so that farmers can apply to this REAP program.
Or any other program. Representative Murray?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. That was my point. I think that to represent, based on what Representative Bixby was saying, I think that what we are recognizing is that some of the other industries and businesses that he mentioned with that income cap have a leg up on farmers with the ability to hire somebody independently and go out and seek those grants, whereas farmers don't necessarily have the time nor the extra funds. I mean, we see that our farmers sometimes are living on very small budgets here in New Hampshire, and I think that this would be an opportunity to present an additional resource bank for them to be able to seek the grants, know what's out there, and then be able to access those.
Okay, so, I mean, in a nutshell, I think we're looking to have some mechanism, program, agency, organization, whatever, dedicated to help our farmers know about and gain assistance for these energy programs. The question is, does that already exist? And I know in Sullivan County, we just hired a grant writer. And that grant writer is available for anybody to, specifically municipalities in the county. But I would imagine if they put out if an individual wanted to get in touch with whoever it is, the person, that they could pose a question. I'm looking into getting this kind of grant, or do you know of any kind of grants for this? So I'm just wondering if this is replicating anything that's already existing. And it sounds to me that Representative Comtois is saying it is, as well as Representative Smart is saying. Representative Dutsey, your comments.
Yeah, I would, I would say if I'm looking at Hillsborough County, that we would not have any resources. And even though you think of Nashua and Manchester and Merrimack as comprising Hillsborough County, we have a lot of small farms in Milford and Wilton and Goffstown and on and on and on. And they would have no resources because SCORE certainly would not be a resource for them. And, and our farmers in Hillsborough County rely very heavily on UNH Extension. So, for $110,000 a year to hire somebody who would have not only the grant writing expertise, but the energy expertise, I think would be a good use of funds. The other thing is that, our mission here is to support agriculture. Okay. And I think if we can support farmers in this way, it's certainly a good use of our mission.
Did we hear, refresh my memory, did we hear testimony from the New Hampshire Department of Energy as to whether or not they are in a position to help any of our farmers with that? Representative Bixby.
Yes, they said that they did not have the capacity to do that within their department. So this is basically, they said that it's a program that it's a federal program that they are not sort of qualified to provide the support for. There are scattered types of support across the state. Some installers might provide this assistance, but what's lacking is having one person that farmers can go to and say, can you help me figure out what I can do to improve my my energy situation on my farm, and get advice. And this field specialist might not do the grant writing him or herself. They might say, okay, these are the solar installers that might be able to help you with that grant writing process. These are the federal funds that might be available for you. These are state programs that might be available for you. These are different aspects of energy on your farm that, by working on them together, you could get a more effective energy system than by just putting in solar panels piecemeal.
And Farm Bureau can't provide that.
Farm Bureau does not. That's not what Farm Bureau does. So what we're looking at is someone who can really provide the advising expertise to help farmers pull together the resources that they need most efficiently. And that is something that cooperative extension does highly effectively in a number of different fields. So for instance, if the cooperative extension forestry expert does not write the forest management plan for a timber owner, they provide the education to help the timber owner know how to select a forest manager. So by the same token, this field specialist would provide the farmer with the knowledge that they need in order to pull together the resources as efficiently as possible. And another aspect of it is there is a lot of federal money out there that New Hampshire is missing out on because we don't have because people don't know how to do this and they don't know it's available.
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Bixby, you mentioned installer, and then you mentioned solar. So basically, is this strictly, when you're talking about energy efficient, are you talking about solar installation? And if so, if it is solar, most of these solar people would know about all these grants and would be more than happy to help the farmer.
This is not strictly for solar. This is for the entire range of energy uses on the farm and how to basically optimize all the resources available. So it's not figuring out one niche or another niche. It is looking at it as a global, or as the holistic use of energy on the farm, and how to maximize energy efficiency, which is not solar. Solar is generation, and also maximize generation and figure out how, what resources are available, and that's having an expert who can provide that education is something that has proved to be very valuable in different aspects of agricultural and business planning operations, using the extension model. And I think that it would be very effective to take advantage of that extension model to provide this service for the state.
Thank you, Representative Bixby. Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. I'm a little confused by this conversation because I've been so impressed over the course, the learning curve of my first term, about the support for family farms in New Hampshire. This looks to me like an opportunity to embrace something that's going to help our farmers, and the department has said they can't do it. So let's get somebody who will do it. Thank you.
Well, I think just healthy conversation about various aspects of how and why this should happen, and if it should happen, and if there's any overlap between other departments, etc., is a good conversation to have, so that we're not making decisions that, may have unintended consequences or anything else, but that just like to clarify that. So Representative Coulon, your thoughts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so I know we have 4,000 small farms in the state, so I'm just curious, is there data out there that we know how many of these farms are interested in solar and how many, this person that we would bring on, how many, people are they going to be able to serve? And just particulars like that. Another concern that I have is that it seems like it's where we could be getting a little loose with what is a farm and what is like a small business. So is this, assistance, is this for anyone that wants solar in, any county, or I'm just want to get straight on the details a little bit?
Yeah. Bring up a good point, Representative Coulon. Representative Bixby, in your discussions with Mr. LaValle and others, what is their sense of the numbers of people that they would be able to handle with just one person? And is there thought that they might need more than one person to do this?
So the sense that I got from Director LaValle was that one person would be, one full-time person would be capable of doing this, and that in terms of the numbers, the numbers of people served and how that works, I know that Cooperative Extension has very good numbers on how many people their field specialists serve in different areas, in different areas of specialty. And one of the things that I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but one of the things that I'm always impressed with when I'm going to my county, working with the county advisory committee for Cooperative Extension, is how many contacts the various specialists have with our New Hampshire residents to help them work on their the projects they need to work on. How many people, how many timber owners the forester helps with, how many businesses the business development people work with. They are incredibly good at leveraging resources. And I think that, which is one of the reasons that I think that this could be a real powerful assistance for our state's farmers. In terms of whether it would be strictly farmers or other rural businesses, that is, I had envisaged this as being essentially for farmers, but that is something that, if we want to expand it to a certain range of rural businesses in terms of people who are sort of the support businesses for farmers, like feed stores, et cetera, that we could look at that as a possible approach to it. But I think that I'm just kind of looking at the clock and thinking we probably discussed this as much as we need to discuss it right now, and I will work on bringing forward the amendment, and we can have a more continue to the discussion when it's time to actually.
Fair enough. I think we'll just have Representative Comtois and then Representative Murray and wrap it up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Representative Coulon, for bringing that to the forefront. And I would ask Representative Bixby in his amendment to focus on farmers and to identify, put in a definition, because as Representative Coulon mentioned, we have over 4,300 farms listed in the state, and we need to make sure that they are the priority and not someone just in the rural community regarding this program.
Thank you, Representative Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also would like to echo Representative Comtois and Representative Coulon in their desire to have farming well defined. I would also like to see that including things like aquaculture and other types of farming that are not just traditional land use farming. So when we're talking about those things, I think in the realm of what's possible here for New Hampshire and New Hampshire farming, having access to a resource like this is incredibly beneficial to not only the farmers themselves, but the state.
Thank you. Representative Potenza, you are the last person to speak here.
So just a quick question for Representative Bixby. So is this entire bill going to change and actually focus on, the whole gamut of energy relief and not just solar? And then in regards with this position that you're talking about, a field specialist, costs and all of that type of stuff will be outlined, because as of right now, these people that are going to be appointed from the commissioners are just experts in the field and all of that are not being paid. So
Okay,
Representative Bixby.
So the amendment will completely rewrite the bill. It will not be a task force. It will not be people appointed. It will simply create a field specialist in cooperative extension who will focus on focus on farms and how farms can optimize their energy infrastructure. And when I talked with Director LaValle last spring, he said that the cost of such a specialist would be $100,000, including salary, benefits, and transportation.
And I might add to that we did, I did ask Representative Weiler, who is chair of the Finance Committee, whether or not such funding would be available. And he enthusiastically said, yes, for sure. So with that being said, I've also had conversations with other colleagues of mine who have said, we really give a lot of money to UNH already, and I'm surprised that they can't find enough money in their own budget to deal with this without getting more. That being said, I think I will be interested in seeing the amendment that you develop, Representative Bixby, and we can leave it as that for now and come back and talk about it when we look at the bills that we're going to dispose of. Okay. Thank you for a very interesting, lively conversation on all these bills this morning. It's very, very nice. I'm enjoying this. Okay, HB 493, eliminating the state meat inspection program. Representative Bixby.
This is my bill. I don't think it should go forward. End of discussion.
Short and sweet. That's good. Anyone else have a comment on this? I agree. Okay, move on. Okay. So our very last bill that we're going to discuss is HB 602, relative to landfill siting. Have we had enough of this topic this year? Representative Bixby.
I think that we saw what happened with our other landfill siting bill, and that I have heard that our Senate counterparts have no interest in seeing another landfill bill. I think that that there is not much use for this one at this point.
Representative Potenza.
So Representative Simon, I assumed was going to be here today, and he's not. And so just in championing for him, there is going to be an amendment that's going to be put in, I believe, on 602. And I can literally read what it's going to do. And it's pretty much replacing everything that's in here. And it's not going to be in a sense a citing bill. And so do you want me to do that, or what would you like?
Well, as far as I understand, and what my colleague Representative Comtois is telling me, that we are the only ones who can put an amendment onto a bill that we are considering that has been retained, that someone else in the House can't change that bill. So
Well, that's true.
I don't
Well, then
know.
maybe
I don't know.
I would.
Representative
or-
Bixby?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yes, it is correct that since the bill is retained by our committee, we have control of the bill. If you would like to put an amendment on it, then, that is entirely your right as a member of the committee. And, if you would like to just tell us briefly what that amendment would do, then, I think we'd be happy to hear that.
I'd be happy to. So, my esteemed colleague, Potenza, and I are working on an amendment for this bill. We are extremely concerned about two issues. One is transparency, and the other is protection. So the essence of the amendment will be for DES to have a process that allows the public to see what they are coming up with, that there would be, in the spirit of protection, some prohibitions to where citing a landfill would be completely inappropriate. So again, protection and transparency and public hearings, public comment. We're just trying to ensure that the people who will bear the burdens of the decisions we make will have ample opportunity for input, will have enough transparency to know what the process is, what's under consideration, and we'll work on the wording and get back to you when we have it.
Okay.
And I'd just like to
Representative
add.
Potenza.
I'm sorry. So, I think that this is a win-win, especially for DES. And I think for the most part, I'm going to just read. So, unlike other states, New Hampshire's landfill application process requires that the developer to submit each permit, air, wetlands, solid waste, in full before DES will review it. This can be very costly to the developer and to the state, as thousands of persons' hours and staff time are needed to review a full application. Therefore, like a two-phase permit process will save both private and public money. So this bill merely asks DES, while it's already revising the relevant regulations, to create a preliminary application phase so that applications that are clearly ill-conceived can be rejected based upon evidence contained in partial permit application. Those applications deemed plausible can then proceed to a full application, which can be processed more quickly than a single phase applications, since DES will already have evaluated the basic parameters of the location proposed. So, because DES already does have this information, there's certain things that would be an automatic reject, which, our committee does know pretty well. So that's just giving you a little bit of a preview.
It seems to me, though, so that you would be rewriting the entire bill. Why wouldn't you just submit a new bill for next year and scrap this one? Representative Bixby.
Yeah, so, I think that, because because what the proposed amendment would be doing is in fact, related to the permitting process, I think this is actually a very reasonable thing to do with this bill. So I think that, in terms of why you would do it, amend this rather than have it, submit a new bill. One aspect of that is that it gets it through the process a little bit faster.
That's right.
So we can, if we choose to accept this amended bill in our committee, it goes to the floor in the House in January instead of in February or March. It then goes immediately to the Senate, so that it will probably save 3 or 4 months on the bill process, and that's not crazy.
No, except that it would seem to me that since this is a whole rewrite, it hasn't really had a public hearing on the new aspects of this bill. That would be my only concern. Representative Murray, I'm sorry.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. But I do think that to that end, the topic is substantially similar. So I think that there is a connection to the type of information that was brought forward between the committee. So to echo Representative Bixby, I think
I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I'm just questioning it. Representative Potenza.
So it's, to me, it's kind of like this bill talks about what is the mandatory language, and instead we're kind of bringing it back to the permissive language. So it's really the same bill, but it's just leaving the outcome of the agency rather than like prejudging the outcome. So it's not totally different, but it's just, it's instead of going down, because they're doing the rulemaking, we're not giving those criteria, we're kind of dialing it back a little bit. So yes, there's difference. I understand that, but I still think it's within the same scope that we can do this.
Representative Bixby.
I think that if we have a concern about whether amending it to this extent would be considered non-germane, we should consult with the clerk about that, and Paul can give us a read on whether we might need to have a new public hearing.
Okay, thank you. I would do that. And so I would look forward to seeing whatever amendment you come up with, and then pass it by the House Clerk to see if it is substantially different and require, a call of whether it's germane or not. Representative Howard.
I have a question for the writers of this amendment. Does this preclude the criteria? Are we entrusting the rules back to the commission and not having any requirements about the rules or the criteria for citing?
I'm sorry, Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're giving the department the kind of guidance that we believe they need to write the rules. So we're going to clarify. There's not a lot that's new. It's just clarifying with language that will help us increase the protection for landfill siting.
Representative Murray, and then you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to be clear, the rule writing process is already underway. Am I not mistaken?
Yeah, right. Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to mention the same thing as Representative Murray, that the rulemaking process is already underway. And by the time this gets to the floor, there'll already probably be 9 months to a year already in the rulemaking process.
Representative Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say I look forward to reading the amendment. I, for one, am not sick of the landfill siting bills. But one of the things that I appreciate, and as I said, I look forward to seeing the details, is that we focused a lot on the rules, and with good reason, but I think we do need to have a conversation about the permitting process itself. That are there better ways, both for applicants and for DES, to operate that permitting process. So if it's a staged process, to take a look at how other states, for example, conduct their permitting processes. So I in particular, I look forward to reading the amendment and more detail about how the permitting stages would be structured.
Thank you. Okay, so I just want to get a reading from the committee here. So we've mentioned several bills today that would be brought, some new amendments would be brought to them. Do we want to have another work session to review those amendments and discuss those, and then have another meeting where we have our actual exec session? How does everybody feel about that? Representative Bixby.
I think another work session would probably make sense. Yeah.
Okay. And any sense of everybody as to what the time frame for those, for that next meeting should be? How much time will we need for amendments to be drafted and developed? Representative Bixby?
I'd suggest early October.
Okay, early October, we can have Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Bixby, with OLS being flooded with LSR requests this week, will these bills take priority?
In terms of so the with the amendment process as opposed to the new bills for next term, I believe that certainly we don't want to give them any amendments this week.
Okay, so we should wait.
So, but starting, if we have the amendment, as starting next week, as soon as we have the amendments prepared to the point where we think that they're ready to be drafted, then we then we can bring them to OLS. But I think that it would not be useful to have them going in this week.
Okay, so perhaps maybe what we can do is have another work session on October 24th, and then an exec session on the 31st. How everybody feel about that? Or, yeah.
Madam Chair, can I just, I do believe there was also a subcommittee that is convening in October at some point, so I wanted to make
Right.
sure that we weren't.
Right, I wanted to go over that as well.
The rules subcommittee is meeting on. Madam
Representative
Chair.
Creighton, yeah.
Sorry. The rules committee, rules subcommittee is meeting on the 24th. But we can work timing on that and adjust it so we could do both meetings same day if that's okay with everyone else.
I mean, we can also do October 24th for our next work session, and then do an exec session on the 7th, because I don't know if people have children they want to go Halloween trick-or-treating with and whatnot. I don't want to.
Where's our deadline?
That's an election day, isn't it?
It is an election day, yes.
So I think that there is a general prohibition on doing
Yes.
on doing committee stuff on election days.
All right. Well, I guess we can do exec session's not going to take very long anyway.
Yeah.
So if we did October 31st, we could just do that early in the morning, take care of the 6 bills, and Representative Comtois.
Madam Chair, I agree that we need another work session, but do you think the work session will take all day on the 24th? And if not, could we just do the exec session in the afternoon?
Oh, okay. That works too. Okay, then we'll do that. Thank you for that suggestion. Representative Murray.
Comment over here.
So yeah, I just wanted to make sure, for our own planning purposes, if we choose to condense all 3 meetings into one day, it would be the rules meeting, it would be our work session, and then the exec. That would be a full day,
That's
correct?
cool. Because then you're going to want to have a caucus in between. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Representative Murray's exactly right. If we did the rules, then the discussion, and then the exec, you're probably, just looking at this, there's going to be 2 or 3 bills here we're going to want to have a caucus on. So you add that in there and lunch. That's, just, just get ready to get a good night's sleep beforehand, because that'll be a long day.
Could we do the work session on the 17th instead?
Well, we could do a committee meeting work session on the 17th, although Representative Creighton would not be able to attend that.
I'm just checking what time my flight gets in.
Well, the thing is that, so we have members of our committee who have been placed on the DES Rules Update Subcommittee for our and they are planning on meeting on the 24th. That's the issue. So,
We can, I mean, the rules committee, subcommittee is here. We can move that if you would. I mean, I'm just looking for a sense of who's on that committee, we can move that too, if we need to.
How long? May I? How
So,
long?
so the people who are on the DES Rules Update Subcommittee is Representative Creighton, Representative Murray, Representative Potenza, Representative Haskins, Representative Germana, and Representative Davis.
For the rules? Is that what you're asking?
You guys can decide when you're going to meet.
Ma'am, I can do a 17th. If we want to do the 17th for the discussion, and the 24th for exec and rules, we can, that'll be fine.
Yeah. That sounds
All
good.
right,
I think that makes sense.
all right.
17th and 24th. October
Oct-
17th.
October 17th.
Just-
Excuse me.
So the 17th would be further discussion and and presentation of the four, I think, how many ever amendments for discussion. And then the 24th would be the rules subcommittee and then an exec session. We'll look at the times.
Okay. All right. Thank you for discussing the scheduling. Representative Bixby.
So if we're moving on to a different topic, if if we can do that right now. I just wanted to mention that I have put in a bill that will provide for a position and a half in the Department of Agriculture for organic certification because the commissioner is concerned that the current way that things are set up is likely to cause a loss of certification in the department. And there was a listening session with New Hampshire NOFA, Organic Farmers Association, last night, and I was extremely impressed with how strongly the organic farmers want our Department of Agriculture to maintain that certification program and not have to go to other sources for that. There was a real strong sense of support for how well our department is currently doing that, and the fact that our department is highly accessible and they are very, having that New Hampshire seal of certification is something that means a lot to them in terms of both pride and marketing. So that's something that, so if you have constituents who are organic farmers, they may be getting in touch with you, let them know that that bill is in process and that, providing their support for that bill is a way to help keep the certification in the state.
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Bixby, I was not able to attend the meeting. They said they were going to record that. Is that on their website?
I don't know if it's up yet, but they are going to have that available on their website. That it will be on the New Hampshire NOFA website.
Okay. All right. One other thing I wanted to cover with you guys is the House leadership is putting together an effort for each committee to look at administrative rules in conjunction with, and this is going to be a huge undertaking. It's probably going to not just take our term, but maybe spill into other terms, to look at administrative rules for the agencies that we deal with, excuse me, to make sure that what the statutes require and what the rules require or request are one and the same, and that the agencies are not overstepping their authority or bounds or whatever in the rules that they have put forward. So there's going to be an effort for, they've requested 3 people from each committee to take a look at and go through the rules for the agencies that we deal with. And I have suggested from this committee, and this rules subcommittee would be reporting to Jelcar. I have requested from this committee Representative Dutsey, Representative Haskins, and Representative Davis to be included in that effort. And I am still waiting for the parameters and guidance and everything else from House leadership as to how they want to proceed with this. They just needed the names of 3 people to participate. So just so that you know where this is, like I said, I'm still waiting for the guidance from House leadership on how we'll proceed with this subcommittee. Questions?
Volunteer.
Oh, okay. I can put your name in too, and all right. Some of you are also involved in other subcommittees. I know that we have some people who are Representative Davis and Representative Brulard, who is on the EPR study committee. Who else from this committee? Anybody involved in that? No. Okay. Who else is on that committee, that study committee? Is Partial, Representative Partial, I think. Lucian Partial is in it. And I think Representative or Senator Altschuler's in it. Yeah. And I think there's one other person. No, there's only 4. Okay. All right. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to make sure that you were aware, I know I sent out the email with the report from the New Hampshire Department of Agriculture, Markets and Food. We had the Division of Accounting Services, or actually review and reporting requirements for dedicated funds. And I just wanted to know if you all received it, and just so that you can take a look and see, what the revenues were and what the expenditures were and so forth. And it's good information to know what DAMMF is doing. The other thing I wanted to point out to you was, and there was a notice in the House calendar that the Big E is coming up. And Commissioner Jasper, I guess it's not in this one, it's the new one. Commissioner Jasper had put out a notice, which I sponsored in the House calendar, saying that House members each may get 2 free tickets to the Big E for this year. All you have to do is contact the Department of Agriculture secretary over there in the annex building and request 2 tickets, and you got them. So I hope that you'll avail yourself of that opportunity, because the Big E is fun. It's the Eastern Expeditions, and it's held down in Springfield, Massachusetts.
Cool.
Huge. And it has 5 New England states, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Maine they have their own buildings and all kinds of competitions and so forth. So, don't know off the top of my head, but it's all listed in the latest House calendar. There's a notice. So if you look in there, you'll get all the information you need. Anything else that anybody has for the good of the committee?
I have a
Second.
question, and Representative Comtois might be the person who knows more than I do, which is on the non-amenable species study committee. Do we have a 3rd House member yet?
You may.
Thank you, Representative Bixby. I spoke with Madam Chair, and she had put Representative Coulon's name into the speaker. I don't believe we received any confirmation of that yet.
I will go to the speaker's office after this meeting and make sure that something is done.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Germana.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to inform the chair and the committee that I've also been serving on the unlimited service area access, the out-of-state trash special or study committee rather, and we are meeting again this week. We are going to be hearing from the Attorney General's office regarding the specifics about the Interstate Commerce Clause and how it limits us perhaps, and also a representative from the municipally owned landfill in Mount Carberry. So we're hearing from a variety of groups, and I am cautiously optimistic that we will have some legislation coming out of the study group by November.
You'll be talking trash, huh? All right. Thank you. Yeah, any information you have from any of that is always helpful as I serve on this solid waste working group. So good to know, especially also the folks who are serving on the EPR study committee. Anything that I can bring to the solid waste working group at our monthly meeting, which meets at the end of the month, is always very informative and helpful. Anything else from the committee? I want to thank you very much for your time and attentiveness and our lively discussions today. I appreciate seeing you all again, and look forward to seeing you again on October 24th, 17th.
Okay,
17th.
so for the Democrats,
17th.
for the Democrats on the committee, please stick around so we can have a little bit of a discussion.
We're gonna go upstairs.